Why don't people realize it's not a tipping culture problem, but a not paying your employees enough problem? I don't think it's the tipping people that get paid to dollars an hour that people have a problem with. It's why I'm going shopping at Walgreens and it's like, add a tip. For what? Why is tipping everywhere now instead of just for the people who actually need the tips? I would prefer that we were like other countries where no one's wage is majorly from tips. Tips should be what they are supposed to be. Here's something extra specifically for you, because the service was really good and I appreciate it. It's neither. It's a menu pricing competition problem. If a restaurant wanted to drop tipping in favor of wage, then they'd have to bake the price of that wage into their menu prices, and they'd appear to be much more expensive than their competition. Even restaurants that don't like the tipping system would be swimming uphill to go against it. We need legislation to change things, as the current system incentives adherence. I think this argument kind of falls apart when the default option on the POS system for a tip at many self-serve places, coffee shops, etc., is 20 or higher. Establishments where employees are paid higher than $3.25 each are unlike servers. When people complain about tipping culture, I think it's mostly the expectation to tip recently, going beyond the traditional spots such as sit-down restaurants and bars. Because it's normalized in America. In Europe, even though waiters, waitresses, etc. are still minimum wage jobs by our standards, they aren't reliant on tips. Then you have political commentators who just say stupid stuff like just work somewhere else, without realizing if every waiter, waitress did that, then they wouldn't be able to eat out. It might be a perception thing, but having frontline employees be the ones that ask for tips essentially makes it a tipping culture problem and not an employer problem. Having the 21-year-old barista or boba cashier look you in the eye after making you choose what obscene amount to tip on the screen makes it something they're perpetuating. A lot of waiting staff I've spoken to from the US and UK actually would rather the tipping system stay in place, because they tend to earn more than a set hourly wage. I don't get this at all though. I prefer the security of knowing I will get a minimum of a livable wage, and tips are always nice extra on the side. The price of meals is going to go up more than the tip amount if we adopt your scheme. Restaurants run on really thin margins and mostly go out of business. If staff gets paid more, prices have to rise. And because the employer has to pay FUI and SUI in the US, prices will rise more than just the amount of the tip. Worked as a server for close to a decade in NYC, mostly in fine dining establishments, would average out $50 to $70 per hour in most of them. I don't think there's any employer out there willing to pay that much for such a basic skill. It's only a paying your employees enough problem if you don't work in the service industry. The only change that should be made is raising the tip min wage to $2 an hour. Is way too low. Just there to be eaten up by taxes. Depends where you are located. In Canada, waiters, waitresses can be paid like $20-23, which in my opinion is plenty for an entry-level job. Expecting a 20 tip on top of that wage is definitely a tipping culture problem. Would you be more comfortable with the base cost of every food raised, or with the portion that would have been a tip being a line item on the bill showing that it is going to employees' wages? It's because tipping culture is the reason the employers cannot pay their employees a living wage. If everyone stopped tipping overnight, businesses would need to adjust to keep staff, because no matter how much they were paid by their employer, entitled chits would still consider me evil and cheap if I didn't give them an extra bribe on top of the total, because in the US restaurants with wait staffs fail all the time, and the profit margin is so slim. Paying the wait staff $15 a hour would raise prices by 25 or more. I'm not from USA, so pardon, but I'll say either way, it's not customers' problem. They shouldn't be obligated to pay little money every time for someone else's wage issues. As a former server, this is false. Tips incentivizes turning tables and upselling, which result in earning more tips, which is income I didn't need to fully report. Ask a server if they'd rather have a higher fully tax, wage or work at a place where the clientele gives good tips and let me know what they say. Because people are hesitant to hold businesses responsible and prefer pointing at individuals as blame for the economic situation we're in. I think a big thing that is lost is that a lot of people choose to work these jobs because of the extra money they can make. Because it's easier to say you're going to opt out of a culture than opt out of tipping an employee who relies on tips. The ironic thing about this is that the customers fully understand this. It's the workers that don't get it. It's a legal problem. As long as it's legal for restaurants to do this, it will never go away. It is a tipping problem. The system is only possible because people are okay with tipping. Because the media and big corporations brainwashes society and makes it our problem. Min wage in Ontario is $16.50 an hour. It's 100 a tipping culture problem. Why do you base your question on a premise that not everybody agrees on? People can't feel personally attacked if you make it a wage problem. Some evil restaurant owners either pull tips or steal them outright.